They say you should never judge a book by its cover. But what happens when a man walks into a luxury dealership looking like he just crawled out of a ditch, and announces he wants to buy not one, not two, but 5 brand new trucks worth over $1 million? The sales team laughed. The managers smirked. Everyone assumed he was either drunk, delusional, or completely out of his mind. But what happened next would haunt them for years and teach them a lesson about respect they would never forget. This is that story. The afternoon sun blazed through the massive glass windows of the Kenworth Premium Truck Center on Industrial Boulevard. Inside, the polished concrete floors reflected the gleaming chrome of 18 pristine commercial trucks, each one a masterpiece of engineering worth more than most people's houses. The air smelled of new leather, motor oil, and expensive ambition. 3 sales associates stood near the reception desk, their designer heels clicking against the floor as they chatted about their weekend plans. Jennifer Walsh, the senior sales manager with perfectly styled auburn hair and a sharp navy blazer, was showing her colleagues photos from her vacation in the Bahamas. Next to her stood Kylie Chin, young and ambitious, barely 6 months into the job but already convinced she knew everything about selling high-end commercial vehicles. The third woman, Patricia Moore, had been with the company for 15 years and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen every type of customer walk through those doors. Or so she thought. That's when the glass entrance doors swung open and everything changed. The man who entered looked like he had been living on the streets for months, maybe years. His beard was thick, gray and unkempt, hanging down past his collar in tangled knots. He wore a faded denim jacket with patches sewn over the elbows, cargo pants stained with grease and dirt, and steel-toed work boots that had clearly walked thousands of miles. A weathered baseball cap sat crooked on his head, and he carried an old military-style backpack that looked like it had survived a war. The conversation at the reception desk stopped immediately. Jennifer's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. Kylie suppressed a giggle, covering her mouth with her hand. Patricia simply watched, her expression neutral but curious. The man didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He walked slowly through the showroom, his boots making soft scuffing sounds against the polished floor. His movements were deliberate, almost reverent, as he approached the largest truck on display, a gleaming white Kenworth W990 with chrome accents that caught the light like diamonds. He stopped in front of it, reached out with a calloused hand, and gently touched the massive front grille. His fingers traced the chrome edge with the kind of familiarity that spoke of years spent around machines like this. Then he whispered something too quiet for anyone else to hear, as if greeting an old friend he hadn't seen in decades. The 3 women exchanged glances. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. Kylie bit her lip, clearly trying not to laugh. Then the man stepped back, looked up at the truck with something that resembled pride, and spoke in a gravelly voice that carried across the entire showroom. "I'll take 5 of these." The words hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Then Kylie burst out laughing. She couldn't help it. The sound echoed through the showroom, sharp and unmistakable. She quickly covered her mouth again, but the damage was done. Jennifer's lips curled into a barely concealed smirk. Even Patricia, usually so composed, allowed the faintest hint of amusement to cross her face. Jennifer recovered first, clearing her throat and adopting her most professional tone. "Sir," she said, walking toward him with her hands clasped in front of her, "I think there might be some confusion. These are commercial-grade heavy-duty trucks. Each one costs approximately $240,000. That's not including taxes, registration, or delivery fees." The man nodded slowly, his expression completely calm. "I know," he said simply. "And like I said, I'll take 5. Kylie couldn't hold it in anymore. She laughed again, louder this time, then tried to disguise it as a cough. "Sorry," she muttered, turning away. "Allergies." Jennifer's professional mask was beginning to crack. She glanced at Patricia, who gave a subtle shrug. "Sir," Jennifer continued, her voice now edged with condescension, "perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the used truck lot about 3 miles down the road. They have some very affordable options there. Financing available too if you need it." The man smiled faintly, a sad but knowing smile that suggested he had heard this kind of thing many times before. "I appreciate the suggestion," he said quietly, adjusting the strap of his backpack. "But I'm in the right place. Maybe you're just looking at the wrong man." Jennifer's smile became fixed, frozen. "Right. Well, if you're serious, we'd need to run a credit check, verify employment, proof of income, business registration if this is a commercial purchase." The man nodded again. "I understand. I have all the documentation you'll need." He started to reach into his backpack, but Jennifer held up a hand. "Sir, honestly, I think you're wasting both our time and yours. These trucks aren't toys. They're serious investments for serious businesses. The man's hand paused. He looked at her for a long moment, and in that moment, something shifted in his eyes. Not anger, not resentment, just a deep, quiet sadness. "You're right," he said softly. "They are serious. That's exactly why I'm here." He turned away from Jennifer and walked toward the corner of the showroom where a small coffee station was set up for customers. He poured himself a cup of water from the cooler, drank it slowly, then refilled it and stood there, looking out the window at the traffic passing by on Industrial Boulevard. The three women huddled together near the desk. "What do we do?" Kylie whispered. "Do we call security?" Patricia shook her head. "He's not causing any trouble. Let him finish his water and he'll leave on his own." Jennifer sighed. "I'll give him 5 more minutes. If he doesn't leave, I'm calling someone." What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the man standing by the window had a story that would make theirs seem small and insignificant. His name was Thomas Mercer. 63 years old. Former Army logistics officer. Former business owner. Former husband and father. The word former had become the defining term of his life. 20 years ago, Thomas had owned one of the most successful small trucking companies in the state, Mercer Transport Solutions. He'd built it from nothing, starting with a single used truck and a dream. Within 10 years he had a fleet of 20 vehicles, employed over 40 people, and was grossing $3 million annually. He had a beautiful wife, Sarah, and a son, Daniel, who was studying engineering and planned to take over the business one day. Life was good. No, life was perfect. And then everything collapsed. It started with Daniel. A car accident on a rainy night, a drunk driver running a red light. Daniel died instantly. He was 22 years old. Sarah never recovered from the grief. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped living. Within 2 years she passed away from what the doctors called heart failure, but Thomas knew the truth. She died of a broken heart. Losing them destroyed him. Thomas stopped caring about the business. He missed meetings, forgot to pay invoices, ignored calls from clients. The company began to hemorrhage money. Competitors swooped in and stole contracts. Employees left for more stable jobs. Within 18 months, Mercer Transport Solutions declared bankruptcy. Thomas lost everything. The trucks were repossessed. The office building was foreclosed. His house was sold to pay off debts. At 60 years old, he found himself with nothing but the clothes on his back and the memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. For a while he lived in his truck, the one vehicle he'd managed to hide from the creditors, an old beat-up semi that barely ran. He slept in rest stops, showered at truck stops, and ate whatever he could afford from gas station vending machines. He picked up odd jobs fixing engines, doing roadside repairs, anything to survive. Most people in his situation would have given up, would have disappeared into despair. But Thomas Mercer was not most people. One night, while sleeping in his truck at a rest area outside of Kansas City, he met a young woman named Maria. She was sitting on the curb, crying, her car broken down and her phone dead. She had 3 kids in the back seat, all under the age of 7, and she was trying to get to her sister's house 2 states away to escape an abusive husband. Thomas fixed her car. It took him 3 hours in the dark with nothing but a flashlight and the tools he kept in his truck. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for anything. When Maria tried to pay him with the last $40 she had, he refused and gave her his phone charger instead. "You're going to need that more than I need your money," he told her. Before she drove away, Maria looked at him and said something that would change his life. "You're an angel, you know that? The world needs more people like you." That night, lying in his truck and staring at the ceiling, Thomas made a decision. If he couldn't save his own family, maybe he could help save others. He started thinking about all the people he'd met on the road. The single mothers. The veterans. The people who had been knocked down by life and couldn't seem to get back up. People just like him. What if he could give them a chance? What if he could build something that wasn't just about making money, but about giving people dignity, purpose, and hope? That's when the idea for second chance hauling was born. For the next 5 years, Thomas lived like a monk. He worked every job he could find. He repaired trucks for cash under the table. He saved every single penny. He slept in abandoned warehouses, ate ramen noodles for dinner, and wore the same 3 shirts for months at a time. People thought he was homeless, and technically he was. But he wasn't lost. He was building toward something. He reconnected with an old friend from his Army days, Colonel Raymond Voss, who had gone on to become a regional director at Kenworth. Thomas explained his vision: a trucking company staffed entirely by people who had been forgotten by society. Veterans with PTSD. Ex-convicts trying to rebuild their lives. Single parents who couldn't afford childcare and needed flexible work. People who just needed someone to believe in them. Raymond believed in him. He helped Thomas secure financing, set up the business structure, and even personally approved a special purchase order for 5 brand new trucks at a discounted fleet rate. It was an enormous risk, but Raymond had served with Thomas in the Gulf War and knew the kind of man he was. If anyone could pull this off, it was Thomas Mercer. And today was the day Thomas would pick up those trucks. Back in the showroom, Jennifer was losing patience. She walked over to where Thomas was standing by the window. "Sir," she said firmly, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're not making a purchase." Thomas turned to face her. His expression was calm, almost serene. "I'm making a purchase," he said. "I told you. 5 trucks." Jennifer's jaw tightened. "Sir, please don't make this difficult. We can call security if we need to." "That won't be necessary." Thomas reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. It was worn and creased, held together with a rubber band. He removed the rubber band and opened the folder, revealing a stack of neatly organized documents. He handed them to Jennifer. "Here," he said quietly. "Everything you need." Jennifer took the papers skeptically and began flipping through them. Her eyes scanned the first page. Then the second. Then her expression changed. The color drained from her face. "What?" Kylie asked, stepping closer. "What is it?" Jennifer didn't answer. She just kept reading, her hands starting to tremble slightly. The first document was a corporate registration for Second Chance Hauling Incorporated, filed 3 months ago with the State Business Office. The second was a bank statement showing a verified wire transfer of over $1.3 million into a commercial account. The third was a pre-approved financing agreement from Kenworth Corporate. And the fourth, the one that made Jennifer's breath catch in her throat, was a signed purchase authorization letter from Colonel Raymond Voss himself, stamped with the official Kenworth regional seal. "This is real," Jennifer whispered. "What?" Kylie grabbed the papers from her hands and started reading. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God." Patricia moved closer, looking over their shoulders. She read in silence for a moment, then looked up at Thomas with a completely different expression. One of respect. "Mr. Mercer," she said softly. "I apologize. We had no idea." Thomas gave a small, tired smile. "You weren't supposed to," he said. "That's the whole point, isn't it? The world teaches us to see with our eyes, not with our hearts. You saw a homeless man. I don't blame you for that." Jennifer's face was red now, not from anger but from shame. "Mr. Mercer, I am so sorry. I shouldn't have, we should have." Thomas raised a hand gently. "No apologies necessary. You did exactly what most people would do. But maybe next time, you'll think twice before deciding who's worth your time and who isn't." The next 2 hours were a flurry of activity. Phone calls were made. Paperwork was processed. Financial verifications were completed. Every single document checked out perfectly. Thomas wasn't some delusional dreamer. He was a legitimate buyer with legitimate funding, and he was about to walk out of that dealership with 5 brand new Kenworth W990 trucks worth over $1.2 million. As the sun began to set, Thomas stood in the delivery bay, watching as the 5 massive white trucks were lined up in a perfect row, their chrome gleaming under the overhead lights. Each one had been detailed, inspected, and was ready to roll. Jennifer approached him quietly. She had been mostly silent since discovering the truth, clearly still processing her own behavior. "Mr. Mercer," she said softly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you let us treat you that way? You could have shown us the paperwork immediately. You could have proven who you were. Why didn't you?" Thomas thought about that for a moment. "Because," he said finally, "I wanted to see if kindness was something you offered freely, or only to people who looked like they deserved it." He paused. "I used to be one of those people who looked like they deserved it. I wore expensive suits. I drove nice cars. I had money. And people treated me with respect. But when I lost everything, when I looked like this, that respect disappeared. I became invisible. And I learned something important. Respect should never be conditional. Everyone deserves it. The homeless man. The struggling single mother. The kid who made mistakes. Everyone." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Don't be sorry," Thomas said gently. "Just be better. That's all any of us can do." The next morning, the 5 trucks rolled out of the Kenworth dealership at dawn. Each one was driven by someone Thomas had personally recruited. A 45-year-old Army veteran named Marcus, who had been living in a shelter for 2 years after coming home from Afghanistan with PTSD. A 32-year-old single mother named Lisa, who had been working 3 part-time jobs just to keep a roof over her kids' heads. A 58-year-old former factory worker named James, who had lost everything when his plant closed down. A 26-year-old ex-convict named Carlos who had spent 5 years in prison for a non-violent offense and couldn't find anyone willing to hire him. And a 61-year-old widow named Diane who had been forced to sell her house after her husband died and left her with mountains of medical debt. These were the drivers of second chance hauling. These were the people Thomas Mercer believed in. Word spread quickly through the community. The local news picked up the story. A man who looked homeless walks into a luxury truck dealership and buys 5 trucks to start a company that gives second chances to people society has given up on. Within a week, Second Chance Hauling had more job applications than they could process. Within a month, they had contracts with 3 major shipping companies. Within 6 months, they were profitable. But the real impact wasn't measured in dollars. Marcus, the Army veteran, found purpose again. For the first time since coming home from war, he felt like his life had meaning. Lisa, the single mother, was able to quit her other jobs and actually spend time with her children. James rebuilt his retirement savings. Carlos proved to his parole officer and to himself that he could be trusted. Diane found a new family among her fellow drivers. And Thomas? Thomas finally found peace. Not because he had money again. Not because he had built a successful business. But because he had taken his pain and turned it into something that helped others. 1 year later, Jennifer Walsh left the Kenworth dealership. She started volunteering at a homeless shelter, helping people write resumes and prepare for job interviews. She never forgot the lesson Thomas Mercer taught her that day. Kylie Chin still worked at the dealership, but she was different now. More thoughtful. More humble. She had learned that snap judgments could cost you more than a sale. They could cost you your humanity. Patricia Moore retired 6 months after the incident, but before she left, she made sure every new employee at the dealership heard the story of Thomas Mercer. She made it part of their training. A reminder that respect is not something you give based on appearance, but something you give because every human being deserves it. As for Thomas, he continued to grow Second Chance Hauling. He never became wealthy again, not in the way he once was. But he became rich in ways that mattered more. He had a family again, not by blood but by choice. His drivers were his family. Their victories were his victories. Their struggles were his struggles. And every single day when he walked past those 5 white Kenworth trucks, he remembered the moment those women laughed at him. He didn't remember it with anger or bitterness. He remembered it with gratitude. Because that moment taught him something invaluable. It taught him that the greatest strength is not in proving people wrong, but in showing them grace even when they've wronged you. Years later, Thomas received a letter in the mail. It was from Jennifer. Inside was a simple note that read, "Thank you for not giving up on us even when we gave up on you. You taught me that kindness isn't just about how we treat people who can help us. It's about how we treat people who can't. I'll never forget that lesson. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to it." Thomas folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, next to a photograph of Sarah and Daniel. He looked at their faces, smiling back at him from a time when life was simpler, and he whispered, "I did it. I found a way to turn the pain into something good." And in that moment, Thomas Mercer understood something profound. We are not defined by what we lose. We are defined by what we do with what's left. He had lost everything. His family. His business. His home. But he hadn't lost himself. And in rebuilding his life, he had helped rebuild the lives of dozens of others. That's the real story. Not about a man who bought 5 trucks. But about a man who refused to let the world's judgment define his worth. About a man who proved that second chances aren't just for the people we give them to. They're for us too. Because every time we choose kindness over judgment, compassion over contempt, we give ourselves a second chance to be better than we were yesterday. So the next time you see someone who looks like they don't belong, who seems out of place, who appears to have nothing to offer, remember Thomas Mercer. Remember that the most extraordinary people often come in the most ordinary packages. Remember that respect is not a privilege earned by appearance or wealth. It's a right deserved by every human being simply because they exist. And maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice before you laugh. Because sometimes the ragged man buying trucks is actually the richest person in the room. Not in money but in character. And that's worth more than all the chrome in the world.